And we are live. And welcome to the show. It's my second show today, actually, because I was just on with James Tusk just before, and now I'm on with Mr. Paul Benjamin of Apex Mindset. Great pleasure to have you on here again, mate. It's been a while since we've done a show together, hasn't it?
It has, and people really liked the last one we did, so we need to do it more often, I think.
Yeah, definitely, man. Definitely. Well, I was looking back, actually, and we did a couple of shows around this time last year, actually, because I was sitting and there was a load of Christmas decorations up behind me. So we were talking about some kind of interesting stuff, like the Dark Triad stuff and all of that. Getting into some quite deep waters with that stuff. But good to see you, man. Anyway, how are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. I just did kind of something I'm experimenting with and trying something called neurofeedback. So I do meditation, and I got a bunch of wires hooked into my head, and then it's a whole brainwave thing. They're looking at my brainwaves and then mirroring back my brainwaves in an audio, through sound while I'm meditating. Really? Right. It's so weird. But it's cool though. Like it's so what it does. Yeah, what it does is it gives me psychic powers. No, I'm just kidding. That's not what it does. It takes your brain waves are supposed to be in a meditative, or what would be, like a calm, serene state, and all these things that you're trying to achieve through meditation. To be in a peak state, your brain waves for certain parts of your brain are supposed to be within different ranges. When it mirrors back, your brain sees where corrections need to be made, so to speak, and then it starts to make corrections. So it sounds weird. Like if you sit down and meditate and you're thinking, I'm going to think on this key word like success, and I'm not going to allow myself to be distracted or whatever. But then you get distracting thoughts happened, or you get some boredom sets in, different things happen. Well, when this mirroring happens, it calibrates my mind. My mind will self-correct to calibrate to the state that I'm trying to get in during that meditation. And the net result is like one session, an hour-long session, is like doing a month of so if you were to scan my brain, do you know what I mean? Like to see the results, because you can see measurable results based on somebody's brain activity and focus and stuff like that. Alpha, so Philip got the course where I talk about alpha waves meditation. So I have a whole chapter on alpha waves meditation. Dude, that's such a good activity, and it's so easy. It's so easy to do, and that's similar to this neuroimaging. This is more for research and me figuring some stuff out with some neurologists that are local and work out of like U of M and stuff. But this is the alpha brainwaves is easy. You just go into YouTube or you go to my course, because I have in the appendix, the tone for what your alpha waves are. And you just listen to that and shut your brain off. Take like a mini nap for like 5 or 10 minutes. You're only doing 10 or even 15 minutes, let's say. You won't fall into a deep theta sleep. Those waves will keep you actually awake and alert. So when you come out of that, you'll feel like you're rested because your brain's been shut down, but you'll feel like motivated and ready to do stuff instead of groggy. Like, when you take an afternoon nap and you just wake up and you're like, oh God, I shouldn't have done that. So this 10 minutes, you'll feel like I took an afternoon nap, but I'm refreshed and awake and ready to go. Cool. So it's cool, man. I'm glad to see somebody in your audience did that. So it's a good time. Yeah.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. So obviously we're here to have a catch up, but also because you do have this course out now, Alpha Mindset. So wanted to talk about that and to find out really what the thinking behind that was. So this is something, the first thing to say is this is a beast of a course, isn't it? This is a lot this is a lot of material. So how did this come about, and what's your thinking behind it?
Yeah, so it came about more or less out of, we'll say, solving problems for my clients. So I got into this space doing one-on-one consulting. And I'm helping guys with various different things, everything from the pickup side of it to, anything along the seduction spectrum. from
Mm, mm.
pick up to managing plates to managing relationships to getting over breakups and sometimes working with or trying to get an ex back has been a thing, although I don't recommend that at all, but that's been part of it. And so I'm doing all these consults with guys. And then that turned into, people wanting just mentorship for different things because I have a background in performance psychology and using
Right.
performance psychology and performance measures in the military as well as on the civilian side. And so helping guys get more dialed in with productivity, with, getting better at their sales and be able to make sales and do well in that department, getting dialed in with their goals and stuff like that. So that became kind of a niche with that too. Well, in this pursuit and all that stuff, I noticed that guys had limitations that would prevent them from actioning the things that I'm telling them to action. And I'm sure you run into this as a pickup and dating coach, the same thing. It's
Mm.
like you give them the info, but they have trouble taking the action. It's not the case. A lot of times we focus a bit on the guys who are just the internet complainers who don't take any action. And we
Yeah.
go, hey man, do the work, stop being a little,
Yeah.
stop
Yeah.
being a week, whatever.
Yeah.
And, we focus on that because those people do exist, but there's a lot of people who are trying. Most people, they want to be able to get these results. They're willing to do the work, but they have barriers to being able to do that stuff. And those barriers are inside of themselves. It's their inner game that's not dialed in. It's their mental habits, basically. So mental habits are your behaviors, emotions, and even your rationale or your thinking that you've developed over time. Some of
Mm.
those things
Mm.
are good or productive. Think about a natural pickup guy, right? His
Yeah.
mental habits with women, he naturally fell into some habits. So when he deals with a woman, it's like it's already dialed into a degree for him
Mm.
to be attractive. Whereas let's say take another guy who got rejected and kicked around in middle school, high school when he first got, interested in women. And maybe he's more of an analytical type or more of an engineer type. And he's not as socially dialed in as social intelligence, if that was a real thing that we would measure, isn't as high maybe as that natural. He has habits that he has that makes him unattractive. And then you're saying, hey man, here's the skill sets. Well, what does he have to do? He has to recondition those habits. But with those habits, though, come beliefs that have stemmed from that. Maybe it's negative ones. All women just
Yeah.
don't think I'm attractive. Oh, that 9 that's really pretty, she's not going to think I'm hot. I shouldn't even approach her.
Yeah.
That's a negative mindset that this person habitually has, or an emotional reaction. The chick gives them a little bit of a shit test or looks at him a certain way, and he gets a bunch of negative emotions or insecure emotions or anxious emotions because that's been habitually conditioned. So in order to make these changes, I noticed that I want my clients to actually be able to make real substantial change, not just feel good after a session, feel
Yeah.
like they're doing something and then not get the results. So I was like, how can I maximize results? Because I've been developing and talking about basically a frame course, which is going to be seduction mastery, turned into seduction mastery membership program that's going to roll out soon. And I'd been developing that, and I wanted to make sure that that was really dialed in for guys, which is
Mm.
why it's turning into a membership program and not just a course, because it's too dialed in to do in like a 2-month course, right?
Yeah.
But then I thought, though, guys, I'm going to give them this material, but they're not going to be able to action it. And then I'm going to be having to work with them on, like I do in sessions with guys, mental fitness exercises to get their minds lined up so they can do the things that I'm telling them to do for seduction. And then I'm
Yeah.
like, well,
Yeah.
wait a second. Then I notice I'm doing all these consults where I'm telling guys the same assignments over and over again. Okay, you need to do this identity assignment. You need to do alpha brainwave meditation during the day. Here's your morning routine. Like I'm doing the same assignments for guys over and over again. So I'm like, I see these trends Why don't I just develop a course that has all the assignments I've been giving guys in consults, all the stuff that's researched, so that these guys just have it. You just buy the course, you have all of the material, the activity. It's like, it's, learning how to work out. Here's all of the proper way of doing the exercises in a whole system. Talks the theory behind it, the action plan, the what to actually do to work on these parts of your brain and to recondition behaviors, and just give that in a course. And that way, when guys work on the stuff that they're really trying to work on, which is getting the girls or getting the money or whatever it is, being a better man, all that stuff, they have this material they can fall back on and just continue to do that work. Okay, like I'm running into a confidence issue. I need to do these assignments to bring my confidence up, or I'm getting this anxiety. I need to do mental rehearsals and some anchoring to get over that.
Yeah.
And you get what I'm saying. So it was really done. This is not like, although it did very well, I know that when I do the Get the Girls program, more people are going to want to buy into that. You hit on that pain point, or get over a breakup. If I were to do I'm not doing Get Your Ex Back program, but if I were to do a Get Your Ex Back program, huge pain point, everybody buys that. Not as many people buy, okay, this is a long-term self-improvement plan for my brain. Like that's not as, that's not as sexy, right?
Yeah.
And I know that, but that's fine though. It's better for my clients and the people that really want to make substantial changes. So now, now I can reference this course and be like, I'm like, hey, grab that course when you can. It has these exercises. Guys, book my time. I can help them through stuff. Then I'm like, they can get this course so that they don't have to book my expensive time all the time for me to give them the assignments that are in a course for really a lot cheaper. 18 plus hours of material would cost them a lot more to get that from me in a one-on-one than the price of the course,
So what sort of space would you say the ideal target customer is for the program? Is it a guy who's just gone through a difficult time? Is it a guy who's experienced trauma in the past? Or could it equally be somebody who actually they're going along and they feel okay, but things just aren't really working out as they'd like them to? Is it a combination?
It's a great question, because it's really any of that. Which is also makes it a bit harder from a marketing side, because we all know from marketing, it's better to have a niche. If I was interested in turning this particular thing into just a way to make a bunch of money, I wouldn't have done 18 plus hours for what is really a low price for 18 plus hours. I would have done, here's a section on trauma and getting over breakups and covered that. Here's a section on peak performance and the book, for example, The Miracle Morning, was just that guy's particular morning routine that he suggests. And there's many morning routines you can do. He has a particular morning routine. It's like 5 or 6 steps or something. And he's going to see best-selling book. If I wanted to market better, I would have broken this up. But instead, I want to provide more value to the end user who gets it. So that means that, to answer that question, guys who have trauma from past experiences, bad childhood and stuff, yes, this is a great course for you. But guys who are doing really well and very mentally balanced would do good with this too, because they're going to take themselves to the next level in their mental fitness. It's kind of like asking, well, so is a fitness program good for someone who is overweight or struggling with their fitness, or someone who's really fit? Well, we know the answer is the fitness program is good for everybody. You have to do physical fitness. And if a guy who's really fit already is going to just improve or maintain his fitness level through an exercise program, somebody who's lacking in fitness, they're going to just get better, you see? And so we think about doing physical training for our bodies, but we don't think about doing training for our minds, which is a mistake. We think we don't need to because we're thinking all day. But the problem is we're really not thinking as much as we think we're thinking. We are most of our most of our behaviors and responses are actually habituated. All right.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and it's something like over 90% of the decisions you make in your thought process during the day is automatic habituated responses. So when you're running off of habit, all you're doing is getting repetitions, doing the same old thing. And that old thing could be good, or it could be bad, or it could be somewhere in the middle, right? And so if we want to make ourselves better and into that best version of ourselves, we want to target these emotional, behavioral, and thought responses that are not as productive and work to change those. The process is best termed as neural behavioral conditioning. So you got a stimulus, and then you have your neural pathways to a response. That response, that's your habits for most things. And those, if you have, let's say, a response that isn't as good or productive, for example, we want to change that neural connection to that response and unlearn that behavior basically, and relearn or habituate a new response. And there's all different ways to do that depending on what challenges someone's having or what someone's goals are. And so that's what this course is about. It has all this material for guys to tap into, exercises to start to change their brain on a fundamental level. And we're taking out the magical thinking and the woo-woo aspects of things like meditation and hypnosis and anchoring and NLP techniques and identity development and exercises, all this stuff that the self-help world has kind of had good stuff with, but also would attach like magical thinking to it, and even religions and stuff like that. I mean, not to say magical thinking is bad if somebody is meditating and they have a religious belief behind it. I don't think that's a bad thing. But when I say magical, I mean, it's just that's based on belief and not necessarily based on science and benefits from the science, right? What the science says the benefits are. And so I've taken that magical aspect out of it so that people can tap into these activities and get the benefits that we know from a scientific perspective, from neurology and behavioral psychology, that these things do get your results. And so, and then we can max that, instead of a guy trying to, join a weekend retreat and join some, kind of a cult group or something and meditating like hours a day and trying to get some benefits, turning on brainwaves for 10 minutes a day will get them a lot of benefits, and it's only 10 minutes a day. Do you know what I mean? Just meditating with alpha brainwaves, for example, doing, for example, a walking thought where meditation, where it's more of a mind wandering meditation while you're walking, is a way to solve problems and dial your brain into making changes just by walking, and it's something simple, like to be able to do a 10-minute walk in the morning and dial yourself in for the day. Or if you're distressed, to do a 10-minute walk and just think about the thing you're distressed about, and don't make it any goal specific. Don't try to solve anything. Just be upset and feel it, and it's fine, and let that happen while you're walking. You stimulate both hemispheres of the brain, and the forward activity does something to trigger getting to acceptance points with emotions and suppressing and getting rid of negative emotions. So in other words, let's say someone pisses you off, right? You're at home and your girlfriend's like being a total jerk and she pisses you off. You're like, all right, cool. You don't say anything. You just, step outside and I'm going for a walk. You do a 10-minute walk because you're about to rip her head off and lose your frame because she's challenging it. So this person is having that emotional difficulty. He does a walk, allows himself to get a little bit pissed off on the walk, but then that emotion comes down. He comes back 5-10 minutes later. He has his frame back. He handles her in a way that's more conducive of having good game and in handling her and leading that relationship. she may get a little dread and a little bit like, oh, well, he just left, so that might work too, from a game perspective, but you get what I'm saying. So it's like simple exercise, you know what I mean? But there's reasons why that works. And so getting sunlight on your eyeballs, for example, in the morning, to dial in your circadian rhythms, that's another thing, small things, but these small things that'll make huge differences in people's lives.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times it's the little things that add up. It's not some big magical, thing that you need. It's just these little things. And of course it's filled with it. It's filled with that stuff.
Would you say, because I was talking a lot about inner game, well, what we might call inner game, but basically dealing with the inner stuff. And John MLD obviously has been talking about it a lot, but I did 12 days of inner game recently. Cheers, man, on this channel, because my course, CAD Academy, was really primarily was an inner game course. It's like sorting out that stuff, underlying whatever external stuff you're going to do, whatever external tweaks, improvements you're going to make. You've got to get the underlying stuff sorted out first. But I remember talking to John about this and basically saying, look, I mean, in terms of the guys you help, what proportion of them do you think have problems with what we might broadly call inner game? And he was saying, well, nearly all of them. And I think that's the case with myself as well. So would you say most guys that you come into contact, well, I guess by the nature of what you're doing, it makes sense, but most guys really coming to this space have some issues with this stuff that they kind of need to get ironed out?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%. And that's, to get to the next level with anything, you have to sort that inner stuff out first. Usually I use a good tangible example is, let's say, making $1 million or something like that, right? You have to be able to think and be the millionaire first to gain the $1 million. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In a sense, you have to do millionaire thoughts, millionaire behaviors, and then the money comes. It's not like you get $1 million and then all of a sudden, or you're doing a bunch of $50,000 behaviors and then $1 million lands in your lap. That's not usually what happens. And we see that when that does happen, like in cases of people winning the lottery, they're broke in 5 years. Why is that? They didn't have the millionaire mindset. They didn't have the millionaire behaviors. And so money is an easy one to measure because that's either there or it's not there. So, but that has to do with anything. You want really good relationship in your life that's healthy and is how you imagine it to be. You have to be the person who could have that relationship. It's not just about the chick. It's more about you than the chick, And so you can't get what you want not having the behaviors and the mindset to have that thing before you get it. If it other than by chance or luck, and then if that happens, you'll lose it. And that happens to guys too. They get that hot girl because they're working on one aspect. They get, they learn from your stuff, let's say, and they know how to pick up on women and they can seduce them right away. And boom, I got this girl who likes me after a couple dates and I cold approached her and made it happen. Okay, cool. But his inner game's not squared away. And what happens? He's not the person that she thought that he was behaving like when he learned the techniques, and then he loses it. Right.
Well,
and so,
and even James Tusk, of all people, talks about that because obviously, good-looking guy, etc. But he says that earlier on when he was learning this stuff, he became very good at being social and meeting girls and bringing them into his orbit. But then he'd go on a date and it would all fall flat because actually he had very low self-esteem and he just wasn't there. His life wasn't, in many ways, wasn't there enough. And the girls on the date were like, well, wait a minute, I thought this was this really cool guy. And he isn't, and it would just fall completely flat.
Yeah. And that's what happens. It happens to a lot of people. And so, and I call it the alpha mindset course because it's kind of funny. Like that's a very unoriginal name, but I did that sort of intentionally, like whatever it is, what it is.
Yeah.
But guys always think about wanting to be that archetypical alpha. Well, that, people put in their own, ideas of what that means, but really though, being that type of an alpha that people think that they want to be like, the type that they would admire, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's something you have to change up here. Your mindset has to change. And it's not just the thought process, because a lot of times in inner game, like when I'm, and I'm sure you, me, like we're coaching guys in inner game, we're giving them the right mental framework. Right. Like, here's how you need to think about this situation. And the guys are like, oh, cool. I get that on a logical level. But then how do we change the behavioral response? How do we change the emotional response? Right. And so that is where this course comes in. It's actually using exercises to make those changes. Now, sometimes it happens throughout the course of just doing action. Like, sometimes guys, for example, they have approach anxiety. And so, hey, approach 100 women this week.
Yeah.
And then they do it and they get rejected a bunch, but then they realize that this doesn't really harm me that badly, getting rejected. Like, this isn't a big deal. And then that approach anxiety goes down just with repetition. So that's one way, but there's guys, and I don't know if you've seen them, but I have, who they do that stuff. And then those rejections, they leave like a deeper mark in their unconscious. Like, they are more, it makes them more awkward, getting that negative feedback, because they don't have good, healthy self-esteem usually on the inside. And now that becomes, they're using these rejections as a evidence to support the negative thoughts they have about themselves. And so you run into that, right? Instead of what it should do for someone with somewhat healthy self-esteem is they realize that they get to more of an outcome independence. They realize that this rejection has more to do with the girl than anything I'm doing. And so, although there's techniques I can do, like, I need to, just do it. And if I screw up a little bit, it's fine. Would I get the date or not get the date has a lot to do with her. You kind of realize that.
It's funny because we were just talking about rejection actually on the stream I did before with James and Mr. M, another colleague of ours. And some guy, one of the viewers, wrote a comment and he said, how do you deal with what must be the crushing impact of like being rejected so many times over the years? Because we were making the case, look, rejection is good. Everyone gets rejected. If you go out and hit on a lot of women in different situations, you're going to get rejected. It's just part of the game. And he was saying, well, yeah, but so you must have been rejected thousands of times. So how do you deal with that? Surely your self-esteem must be crushed, or at least on an unconscious level. And I was saying, well, no, I don't. Actually, I think it's almost the opposite, to be honest. I think the more that I've done it, actually, the more self-confident I've become, because you become more resilient and you realize, really whatever life throws at you, you can handle it.
Right. And that's the response for most people. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'd probably say 80%. That's why that's really good advice, is just get out. A lot of times just get out there and do it, or just take the damn action. That's the best way. Now, the thing is, though, if you're taking the action while you're doing mindset work, though, you get to where you want to be quicker, like much faster. It could be the difference between getting there within, let's say, someone with approach anxiety, it's really bad anxiety. That particular person might have to do, let's say, 350 approaches before finally that stuff is going away. Like, they're just a really hard case. Well, if they're doing mental fitness stuff, they can get to 100 like a normal person and be at a better place in terms of how they handle rejection. You know what I mean? Somebody has good, healthy self-esteem might be dialed in almost already right away. And in the first 5-10 approaches, getting warmed up, they don't even think about the rejection. And so it's going to expedite the results a lot of times when you take from just raw taking action. Taking action is just like, which you have to do sometimes, but it's like, I'm just going to do it and go through the pain until it doesn't hurt anymore. and I talk about that actually. In fact, one of your in the comments, someone asked about procrastination. And so
yes,
I have some things on procrastination all throughout the course, but the best answer I can give here is to try to develop your intrinsic reward system for those things that you are procrastinating with. And what that means is that's essentially kind of a just do it thing, but I talk about intrinsic reward and why it's important versus having extrinsic reward. So a lot of times when people are facing something they don't want to do, they have to build themselves up to get started. And then they're thinking about a reward down the line that's going to be the reason they're doing that thing. Well,
Yeah.
the problem with that is it may work in the beginning, but you get to a point from what's called a pain pleasure balance perspective that the pain of doing that work doesn't register in your brain neurologically as worth the reward that you're extrinsically giving yourself. So the key then is to find a way, and we have ways of doing this and getting into a productive state versus flow state and some different things in the course we talk about. But the key is to reward the process or the effort versus looking towards this reward outside of the process or effort. So I'll give you a great example. Sales training. So I've helped a lot of guys with that. I used to be a sales trainer too, in a different life, right? And so people were thinking about the money they were going to make and the sales and all of that stuff. And so they were thinking of the reward, and then to make those cold calls or to call those leads was like, oh, dude, it's painful. And then they're worried about rejection. They're worried about losing it because getting rejected in their unconsciously registers for them at that point as not getting them to the money that they want to get to, right? The reward they're looking at is the sales and the money and hey, you're a good salesperson and you're awesome at your job and you just made, $50,000 this month or something, right? That's the extrinsic reward. So then these losses they're seeing as like a big problem now to getting that goal, and it weighs on them more heavily. And so they struggle and procrastinate and put off making those sales calls. And I see it all the time with people in things like real estate and inside sales and different things. They will work on their business all day. They'll play with their website. They'll dick around with their email list. They'll go, do all these things other than make those damn calls because those calls are painful, right? Well, what we want to do is we want to make those calls rewarding. So instead of focusing on all the rewards you're going to get from the calls, we know logically that's what you're doing it for. But now let's scrap that for a minute. Let's work on making these calls rewarding. Let's turn it into a game. Let's turn it into and so once you start doing that, now it's like addicting to pick this. I keep doing this because I'm from the 90s. I don't know, but to pick this phone up, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And make that next call, or, to start going through these leads and taking them through this process of sales and overcoming objections, and like all of that whole process becomes exciting because you're sort of learning about that process and you're turning it into a game where you're trying to sort of win, like a game of chess or a video game even, or something like that. And you do that in your mind, and now you're in the process, and now the process is rewarding. And so now it's like you do a couple of hours of these calls, making these sales calls. You don't want to stop. You might have to physically stop yourself. So you go on the damn appointment. And so, yeah.
Just a little point. Do you think that guys then, are you saying that guys hold themselves back from the really important thing, the real thing that's going to make a difference? Like if it's picking up the phone, doing that sales call, that's the thing. And guys subconsciously are holding themselves back from doing that
all the time. We do. Sure. All the time. There's that 80-20 rule, and there's those things that's going to get you the most results, but oftentimes those things are not seen as rewarding. And so, and how the connotation that you mentally put on something and how you think about that thing directly influences your neurochemical response during the activity. If I find working out intrinsically rewarding, I love going to the gym. I go to the gym, I'm hammering out the next exercise. I'm like feeling some pain but I want to kind of do more. And until I finally exhaust myself, I like that process. And then if I miss too many days of exercise, I start to feel like I'm really missing something. That pain pleasure balance gets switched around. And now the pain is from not doing it versus doing it. And so yeah, that's what happens. You have to, but most of the time guys won't associate the thing that's hard because it's work and it's hard and they're it's not as interesting and all that stuff. And so they associate that with something, God, I just don't want to do that thing, but I know I need to do this thing for my goals. So then they get super pumped up about the goals. Like, I'm gonna do a vision board. I'm gonna have a boat someday as long as I make these sales calls, or I'm gonna have these beautiful women and as long as I make 100 approaches this week. And okay, that's cool. But then once they start doing it, the rejection starts happening and the grind starts happening. Man, that starts to fizzle out. They're like, dude, okay, I just got blown out like 10 times. All right, bro, I'm going to take like a break right now. I'm going to go go for a walk. This is tough. Versus the other guy who's intrinsically rewarding himself. He's like, damn, I'm fucking blown out again. There's another one. And then he goes and approaches her, because he's like, it's like, I have to beat this. I have to beat this. It turns into that competitive nature with yourself,
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's what we transform that.
Do you think that having the end goal in mind, though, having that strong why is key to this as well?
It is. It's certainly, it's like you have to know that strong why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And have to have that vision. In fact, I have an identity module on what's called an identity exercise where you're envisioning and sort of embodying the best version of you in a lifestyle. And that way that helps formulate your goals and helps give you that strong why when you decide to put effort into something. But then once you have that, you kind of want to be able to forget about it and make it about the activity. So using fitness again as an example, like I might have a particular look or a particular fitness goal that I have that's really strong. And it's good that I have that because that's what's going to cause me to want to design this program and wanting to, show up and all that in the beginning. But once I get started, it's not so much about that goal now. It's about the effort I'm putting in that moment. And so there's a lot of people who have a military background do talk about this in different ways. Like David Goggins, for example, that's his whole brand is intrinsic rewards. It's embracing the suck. And we call it embracing the suck. In some ways, you just got to embrace the suck. But how do you do that in a way that's productive and rewarding? And so that's where, we can trick our minds into, and I say trick, but it's really just using our mental systems to our advantage versus disadvantage. And so by having this goal in mind, that makes us really, okay, this is important. And now we start, but I see it as hard or difficult or something I don't want to do. Well, then we transform that into, let's get into this activity and okay, solving this problem or doing this or thing is now somehow rewarding. And then we just continue along with that. Even if it's something as simple as, I don't know, really mindless, but you're just, okay, I'm going to do 20 of them. Let's see if I can do 50 of these mindless things I'm doing. Let's see if I can do 100 of these mindless things I'm doing. It's like you're like setting those mini goals inside the activity, one more rep, one more approach, one more call. Okay, I'm in the call. And then it's like, oh, she said that objection. Okay, cool. That's the one I went over in my training class two weeks ago. Let's say, so you're going through your objection, you're testing yourself out. And so it's about the game. It's about how you play the game. And then that becomes rewarding. And so if you can take anything that you're procrastinating from doing and turn it into a game somehow and make it about how you play it, you won't procrastinate on that thing anymore. And you'll dive head on into it. And so, and the course talks about that and how to do that more specifically and how to step that out and stage that out for different things. And it's good. It's good stuff.
Wow. Yeah, it's in-depth stuff, man. It really is. Guys, if you've got any questions for Paul, stick them into the chat and we'll get them covered while we're on the stream. It's really fascinating stuff. It really is. I find the performance stuff really fascinating, particularly, this elite performance stuff. And reading quite a few. I mean, obviously Goggins, but also things like Relentless by Grover and all
Yeah,
that
great
stuff.
book.
Yeah. Just all of that stuff. It's just really, really fascinating. I mean, is that something that has been a big part of your background? Is that something that you sort of bring into the mix in this course?
Yeah, I've read a lot of stuff like Relentless is good. I really like the compounding effect with Darren Hardy. That was an older one that I thought was really good and impacting.
Yeah.
And compounding effect is a really cool one. And like a lot of these different entrepreneurial success books and things are great reading. I enjoy them. But a lot of this material I got was really more through research on the neurology side of it. So reading papers and experiments and stuff like that. And then looking at behavioral psychology too, because they're tied in together pretty well. And then even looking at evolutionary psychology, which dealing with, pickup and game and sexual dynamics, that was what pointed me more towards the evolutionary stuff. Like, well, wait a second, we're dealing with primitive drives here if we're talking about mating, and that obviously those drives and behaviors that are instilled within us and those reactions that plays a role in seduction, and that's would be good to look at. And so, but then from performance perspective too, though, that stuff can answer a lot of questions with that. So I spend a lot of my time just kind of, I'll have a question or a thought, and then I'll be looking up papers and different research and, studies and, papers that have been done on some of the different things and looking for results, like questions about meditation, like what are the brain, changes that can happen through meditation and how much time is required and like, you know what I mean? And trying to figure it out. So, I mean, my role really is more or less, I know our friend Ryan Stone hates the word, but is more as a coach. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but as a coach, though, what that means is I'm not the researcher. All right. I'm not the one in the university, setting up a clinical trial. I do have anecdotal or data, evidence from working with tons of people and personal experience, but I'm not, I take that stuff into account. I take the field experience into account, people's field experiences, what's happening, but also the results of the individual. And I'm looking at the research, but I'm not the researcher. That's the thing. I'm taking the research and saying, okay, how can we apply this most effectively to get the results in the best way? And
did you have a background in this stuff, or is it just something that you became interested in?
Yeah, so it's kind of both, because I started my career more or less in kind of high level and consultative sales, and then went into the military from that, which is something I had wanted to do all along, but it wasn't until War on Terror and some things that where I could get in due to some waiver I needed for psoriasis of all things. And so then in the military, we were looking at becoming better performers, like almost like a professional athlete, because I got into the special operations side of things where they pay military psychologists. And I got into conversations at the time with the head of neurology over at Harvard about transcendental meditation and how we could implement that as operators to become better operators, reduce anxiety, and reduce the after effects of combat. So like these were all things I got into because of a passion. Now I could have been just a regular dude with a rifle and a trigger puller or whatever, and not dove into this stuff. But I chose to dive into it as a non-commissioned officer in the military, and in those areas, I train other people. So then I'm looking at, okay, how can I better train these guys to perform? How can I think outside of the box of what's already being done institutionally with the military, the army? A special operations guy thinks like that. I'm not just repeating what a drill sergeant did, because that's the institutionalized training. I think about, well, shoot, we want to take somebody and make them a much higher level performer. So how can I do that? And so I look at these ways of hacking through that. And that got me into, performance psychology. And then I was also in grad school for psychology. I left grad school to pursue really where I'm at right now, because the academia is very, I wanted to get into relationship counseling and dynamics with that. And what's being taught or promoted is, so there's some valuable stuff there on the research side. There's some valuable stuff, but as you know, being a red pill person, academia is very gynocentric. And so the model that most therapists and counselors have when they see their clients is going to be a broken one, and they're going to steer the guy or the girl in the wrong way, or the couple in the wrong way. So I left because I was of that. And I was on a series of deployments. I thought, maybe I'll go back. And I said, no, why would I do that? When I can just be a coach, I can pull the research as the researchers do it, because I'm not going to be a researcher. That's not really what my interest in is. My interest is the field and getting results, and what results are guys getting. And so yeah, there is a background there, but and I do have certifications. I mean, I am certified EMDR therapist. I am certified hypnotherapist, a master hypnotherapist, in fact, and NLP therapist as well. So I've gotten these certs outside of conventional, PhD doctorate that I was going for in psychology, but I'm just not, I'm not willing to go through the hoops and play the game and pretend that I agree with the gynocentric narrative to get a degree and an initial behind my name and then do the same damn thing I'm doing now. It's not worth it to me.
Yeah.
So that's all I left that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, fair enough. Philip saying, this is slightly off topic maybe, but how do you deal with psoriasis?
So first of all, get with a good doctor on this, because there's a lot that we know about psoriasis. There's a lot we don't know about psoriasis. Mine was not that bad. Really, it was just a little bit on the elbow for the most part, maybe on the knee, and you barely can tell it's there. Some people have it really bad. And so I'm not about to try to advise you, some guy who's having a genetic predisposition to really terrible psoriasis, like advise you how to handle that better than a doctor might. But basically topical creams worked for me, and then tanning or getting sunlight or red light therapy. And I found that red light therapy was really beneficial. And so I have a sauna, and I do infrared. So this time of year, it can get particularly bad up here in Michigan, because it's cold and snowy and all that, right? And the air here can get really dry. And so it's either, I think it's dryness. So I'm not even sure, because I'm not a psoriasis expert. I'm really not. But I noticed that I get an infrared sauna. I have red light, that I've installed in the sauna that gives me the benefits of red light therapy, which is a whole bunch of different things. I actually do cover this in the course as well, the benefits of infrared and some of these little biohacks. And I found that helps my psoriasis a bit. So, a mixture of topical creams prescribed, and keeping moisture in those areas. When you're not having a breakout, just making sure you're using regular moisturizer. That works pretty well. And then getting the red light, either red light therapy, or if you like to tan or go get sunlight or something like that, go be on the beach or whatever. That should help you out,
There you go. And no, thanks for that. I mean, that's slightly separate to the main topic, but it's good to cover that. And then No Username is saying, could you elaborate more on how to turn the stuff we procrastinate about into games? For example, how can one turn getting good grades in school into a game? Appreciate it, man. Legendary.
Yeah. So let's say getting good grades in school. All right. So you have to, taking a topic, you have to learn a certain amount about a topic and get to a certain level of proficiency. And right now you don't like it. Okay. So let's say it's math. All right. This is a great example, because it was funny when I was in college, because I went to college first, then military, got my undergrad first, then military, then was working on my doctorate. And I said, I'm not going to do a doctorate. And so that was my track. So while I was in college, I was teaching kids, in high school. All right. And I was teaching mathematics for part of it. And so here's the thing, math is a good one, because math generally sucks unless you associate it as not sucking. And so here's what's going to happen at first. You're gonna start it, and you're gonna hate it, and you're gonna be like, this is just stupid and boring, and I don't like doing this. All right.
Yes.
Well, make it about the process. I really want to figure out how to piece this apart. Okay, so I do step 1, 2, 3 to get answer number, the result. Well, why does step 1 or 2 or 3 work? Like, how start diving into the whys, start diving into the topic more deeply. And so when you dive into it more deeply, because if I'm just sitting here going, okay, I'm going to do this thing, that rule. Okay, cool. Like, I'm following different mathematical rules and here's the answer. Oh, that's wrong. Oh, okay. Oh, but I didn't follow that rule I just memorized. It's very surface. You're just memorizing rules, but without any idea of the actual operation behind it. Now, if you get deep into it and start figure out, well, why is this a rule? Like, why does that, and start asking yourself those questions and getting deep into it and start understanding it, you'll start to like kind of get rewarded as you figure it out. And then as you get more correct answers, you'll figure it out. And then you just keep on building. And next thing you know, it's not like you would go do math instead of go hang out at a bar and pick up on women. But when it's time to do the math, you're not procrastinating and like, God, I just don't want to do it, and finding everything else to do. You can dive into the activity much easier, get in that zone, and then now you're in this focused zone or whatever, and it's intrinsically rewarding itself until, of course, you've gotten the proficiency that you have wanted, to where you want in your level of proficiency. So your grades are going well. And so being able to get lost in your studies versus, like, I don't want to do this. And then it's just really dull and boring. And you find your mind drifting to other more interesting things. You make what you're doing in that moment as interesting as you can, right? By diving into it. And it's gonna, like, when it's something that's not interesting to you intrinsically yet, it's gonna suck for probably about a couple weeks. And then after a while, this is the embrace the suck part. Okay. You're just going to have to know in your head that this sucks, but you're going to do it anyway. And if your motivation, a lot of times I tell people the motivation needs to be so that it doesn't suck later. So I'll give a great example of that one. Running. I'm not a big runner. I'm not great at it. Okay. It's not something that I really like doing. However, I didn't want to be in a group environment, in a military environment, especially in a selection process or something, being the guy that's last, sucking wind and dying, and then having not have their energy reserves to go to the next activity during a training environment. I mean, that's the biggest way you look like a weak person in these environments, is to suck at endurance. So even though I liked lifting things better, and even though I didn't really particularly like running, I embraced the suck of running so that it wouldn't suck as bad later. And then eventually it started to reward itself. And eventually I started to enjoy it. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what ends up happening. And I say I'm not this great runner, but at my peak, I was doing, it was not Olympic numbers, but a military 2-mile. I was clearing in about 11 minutes and between 20 and 30 seconds. Now, that's pretty quick for most people for a 2-mile. Yeah.
I heard this is probably massively oversimplified compared to the kind of what level that you're looking at this stuff on. But I heard this very simple little piece of advice, which I actually put into CAD Academy. And it was basically, I think this is actually in the Charisma Myth book by Olivia Fox-Caban. And what it is basically, if you're in a situation that's uncomfortable, say you're sitting on a train and you're late for a meeting, and this happens all the time in London, and then the subway car stops and you're sitting there and it's like, what the fuck's going on? Now, normally when that happens, I'm just going crazy. Oh, come on, fucking hell, what's going on? What the advice is actually to just pause, and then instead of sort of trying to resist whatever's happening, actually really dive into it. So it's like, okay, so these feelings of frustration and anger that I'm feeling, what are they about? How do I really examining them? And she talks about savoring it like a fine wine. Is that the kind of thing you mean? So rather than going, running, gee, it's tiring, it's boring, blah, blah, blah. Actually, instead, just really leaning into that stuff.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, in some ways, that could be helpful. I would say, though, it wasn't so much, I mean, in a way that's effective, I think, is because you're diving into deeper analysis. And
Mm.
that's kind of what, so if I'm like, just like running and it sucks and I don't want to do it, but I'm not just saying, okay, I got to run because I'm about to go to special forces selections and I don't want to be a pussy when I get there. So I guess I got to run. And then I
Yeah.
just run. And that's my mindset. I'm going to resist running every single time. But if while I'm running, I'm thinking about like just, imagining, let's say, doing better and being in that top, 5% of a selection process and having all those numbers add up and then asking myself, God, this hurts, but, and kind of diving into why I'm having this pain or why I'm resisting it and sort of getting, it's really the analysis of it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And embracing the pain. Like I'm not necessarily focusing on, focus on my lungs burning right now necessarily. Although after a minute though, you kind of do, I guess, because you're just like you're sucking, but it's very almost unconscious. Like you're sucking wind, but then you're like, that's getting you, like you've been able to intrinsically reward that feeling. So then you like want to speed up and like suck wind even more. Like, how can I make this suck more? It's like, it's a weird thing. Like when I do it, like Tabata, for example, which is Tabata, when you're doing Tabata sprints is what they are, sprinting. It's like 4 minutes of death. It's okay because it's 20 minutes of as fast as you can go, and then 10 minutes of a rest cycle. So just kind of usually a slow walk for 20 seconds, and then 10-second rest. But by the time you get to that, between set 6 and 8, is you're dying. You're sucking wind. If you've been pushing yourself all the time, you're like, oh, and they did research on this in Japan. It's named Tabata after the researcher as having the highest benefit for your VO2 max per time. And so the reason why is because you have an unbalanced rest work cycle, and the way that works, it challenges your cardiovascular system the most if you're putting max effort each time. Well, it gets to a point though where instead of trying to slow down and, oh, this sucks, on set number 6, you're like, you feel that burn and you like go faster. You know what I mean? You embrace that burn and that bad feeling, and you want to make it go because that's like getting you to where you want to go.
Okay, that's I think that's what I think I mean. It's like you're, instead of resisting whatever it is that's hard, you actually push further into it.
Right. Because it's just getting you the results that you want, making you faster, making you better. In that case,
Yeah, and then what's strange is that then that thing can actually start to become compulsive for you.
Oh, 100%. And even we used to joke around, like we would have like almost like false motivation. Like, come on, guys, this is awesome. Like we're getting smoked, we're covered with dirt. You know what I mean? And we're getting abused practically by instructors. We're like, come on, guys, this is sweet. They're like, all right, go run around the thing again. Yeah, let's run around the thing again. And you're just like, you know what I mean? And we're not, of course, we're just saying it, even though we know. And it makes it kind of comical because we're like, man, this is terrible,
Yeah.
But we're not acting like we're enthused about it. But what's interesting that in this case, that fake it till you make it scenario and embracing it and being like, come on, give me more, actually ends up motivating you. And then it becomes rewarding, end up leaning into it and feeling rewarded while you're doing that activity, and you put more effort into it. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if this is a correct sort of thing to draw into this, but that book about dopamine, Dopamine Nation, and I think because you've read this as well, haven't you? Dopamine Nation, and you know how at the end of that book she says, because for people who haven't read this, the premise is that we are all addicted to dopamine in various ways, and we might get it through drugs or through drinking alcohol or through sex or through shopping or social media, whatever it is. There's so many things that ping our dopamine now. We get that hit and we kind of crave it. But what she ends up saying towards the end is that actually what is more effective for us is to lean into things that are painful. And then she talks about almost like the Wim Hof thing, diving into freezing cold pools of water, or endurance running, or just things that initially are painful, but you do it, and then afterwards you feel amazing, and you kind of want to do it more. And these things tend to be more healthy for us as well because we're pushing ourselves.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, I think that that's valid. And as far as dopamine, it's, you have an interesting conclusion there. I mean, it's weird to say that we're addicts of dopamine, but I mean, in a sense, it's true. You know what I mean? But it's our natural reward systems, is the dopamine. And so we want to be able to play with those systems to our advantage versus allowing those systems to move us to our disadvantage, which in terms of addiction and overstimulation with, let's say, pornography or screens or some of these things that mess with those systems, our body's not evolved to necessarily handle those things in a productive way. We want to be able to, manage those things and do some of these other techniques we're talking about to reward the productive behaviors that'll get us what we want, Yeah.
We're actually on an hour now, so we've done a little while. So obviously I don't want to obviously aware that you're a busy guy, and I've actually got to go and meet someone in a little while. But just to finish off with, perhaps visualization. So no username will ask about. I wonder if you visualize the current status a couple of years ago, and do you wonder about whether you're visualizing where you'll be in a couple of years? I mean, what do you feel? What's your view on visualization?
Yep. And so visualization, I have a whole module on that. Okay. And so visualization is very powerful when done correctly. And what I have people do in this module, it's systemized, because here's the thing about things like affirmations and visualization and stuff like that, is that if you have deep-seated beliefs that these things are not true, they actually can work to your disadvantage. So, for example, if I'm imagining that I'm a millionaire or a billionaire or something, I don't know, that I make $1 million a month, and that's what I'm imagining, but that's not really in my reach in terms of my unconscious mind. I don't understand, like I can't perceive, if I'm like most people can't perceive what it would be like to make $1 million a month. And so they're not there yet. And so that ends up being like almost counterproductive, because it ends up reminding them of where they're not at and that they're not there, and then reinforcing behaviors to kind of keep you in the place that you're in. We'll explain this a little bit better. So your brain is not designed to help you be successful. Your brain is designed to help you survive. Those are two very different things. So from an evolutionary perspective, we're interested in survival, not having a supercar. You know what I mean? And so so we have to understand that our brain is, because of that, our brain is designed to correct problems and look for stability and comfort and homeostasis. Our brain is not designed to do things outside of our comfort zone to achieve a goal by itself. So we have to use our existing way that our brain works in order to step outside of our comfort zone and achieve those goals. And so using visualization is one powerful way to do that. And it's just like we trick our brain from seeing something as not rewarding to seeing something as rewarding, we trick our brain into seeing our current state where we're in, even though it may be very comfortable, as very uncomfortable. And so we believe and we see and can understand that where we're at right now is not a comfort place to be. Even if, let's say you make $100,000 a year and you have a relatively stable life, but you want to achieve something big, you got to see that $100,000 a year and that stability that you're in as painful, as uncomfortable, in order to then start to do things that will cause you to step outside of this existence you have in order to achieve something. Here's a good example. Like I live near the Detroit area, and I grew up around a lot of thugs. So you may know people like this. I do, who they're just not financially stable. I know people, they get down to their last $100 in their pocket, negative in the checking account, and then that's when they start hustling to save money and make money. And then they get $3 or $4 grand up, and then what do?
they stop hustling, they stop working hard, they start spending money and making stupid decisions until they're back to about $100 again. That's their comfort zone. Their comfort survival zone that their brain is associated is between 100 and, let's say, 3 or 4 grand. And if they got higher than that, their brain goes, oh, this is actually not comfortable in a way. Let's do a bunch of things to sabotage it. Okay. And that's how we self-sabotage, because the brain sees it as a risk to be outside of our comfort zone, to be, even though our comfort zone may be terrible, your comfort zone of, let's say, having no women in your life is terrible and lonely and makes you feel bad and you want to change that. But then as soon as you start to try to change it, your brain goes, whoa, that's a survival risk because we've been surviving here. I don't know what's over that hill. So let's try to sabotage you and come back over here, over this, down here in this comfortable area where you're miserable, but you're living, you see? And so visualization, what that does is I have people think like they construct an identity for themselves that's above where they're at. And then they do some NLP techniques that I go over in the course to step into that, visualize it, and then visualize doing these things and being this person that's elevated. And then when they visualize that, embrace that, and embrace actually the emotions and the state of being this elevated person, now they go back to their regular life. And their regular life sucks compared to that guy I was just meditating about this morning. Holy crap, like I got to change this. And so you start looking for opportunities to change. You start challenging your goals that you have and the status quo that you're in, and you start maneuvering in a different direction. And so that's what visualization can do. It can be very powerful. I'll give a really powerful example, and hopefully I won't screw up my entire setup here when I do it. Uh-oh. Okay, almost did. Okay, so I'm going to turn this camera around. I want to show you something, because back in 2014-ish, I got off of one of my deployments. And as you guys know, I went to Afghanistan one more time in 2019 to 2020 before we decided to drop that ball. But I had, had gone through a series of high intensity deployments, that one could say. And I was starting a real estate business, and I was getting into some of these things, and I did this identity and this visualization thing. And what I visualized myself having was this girlfriend with, beautiful girl, dark hair, waking up next to her, and maybe some, dirty stuff happens in the morning. And then I do my routine, and then I have my cup of coffee, and I'm in either my office some days, or I'm on a balcony, and I'm overlooking water, and I'm off like a lake. And that's like my visualization. And so I had this, and I just did it intermittently. I wasn't real disciplined with it back in 2014, 2015. And then I fell off of it because I started just doing other mental fitness stuff. Because remember, there's 18 plus hours and 52 modules. So I was doing other things, and I wasn't doing the identity thing as much in that particular visualization. But this thing was so powerful that year that I did it, I'm actually living every single thing that I had visualized back in 2014, 2015. I probably would have had a lot sooner had it have been for deployments and for these other things. And yes, we thank you. Just to interrupt that, my thought, you absolutely should write all your sexual fantasies down. Email them to Troy. Yeah, and email them to Troy. Email them to Troy, and then send him photos too. Okay, so it's probably some guy, but anyway, but yeah, I'll show you. So this is what. There's my lake. Yeah. Now, of course, and so this is my view when I'm talking to you guys every single day. I jump in that thing every day, by the way, talking about cold water plunges. Ooh, you like that thing? That's so quiet, by the way. If you shoot that thing, let me tell you, you won't hear it. It's like a roofing nail gun, but quieter. Anyway, so yeah, I got all kinds of fun stuff in this place. But that being said, this is what I visualized. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so what happened was, here's in the practical sense,
being where I was at, like someone, being where I was at was uncomfortable. Being in the Baroque sort of status and not having this lifestyle that I envisioned for myself frequently was uncomfortable. And then it'll help me tailor my goals too. I have a real estate license still, but I left that team. They're a great team. It's a great business if you know how to work it. But I wanted to be geographically independent. I'm now in a place where I'm going to San Diego for the Hot Dude Con and meet up with John and a bunch of dudes. I can do that. If I had a real estate business, that would screw my whole business up. If that was how I made most of my money, someday I'll come out and see you when you're out in Eastern Europe, because that would be fun. You know, so like I have this geographic independence now, which is what I was part of my visualization, and the business I had wasn't conducive of that. So even though I was making 6 figures a year once I built it up, it would have been, if I had been thinking about this, I would probably never would have left it. I would have been just grinding it out in real estate, moderately happy, but not really that happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because of that sunk cost of, wow, I don't want to leave this thing I built. Well, I was looking at Amazon drop shipping. I was looking at different ways of becoming geographically independent. The Apex mindset thing happened almost on accident, and that became the thing. But I didn't have a clear vision of where I wanted to go in 2014. I just know what I wanted it to look like. And then from knowing that, my goals could tailor themselves as opportunities arise, as I did more work, got more clarity. And next thing you know, I'm living out this vision. So now I have to do now, and I've been doing this, a different identity exercise that's better than where I'm at. Because where I'm at, I'm already at where I visualized already. So now I have to do something different. And I know this take a little bit of time, but one last note of this, our good friend, Rich Cooper. I love using this example because Rich is a great guy and he's a great entrepreneur and all that stuff. And he has enough money to not do anything. He could be like, I don't care and I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to just hang out and, live the life. Right. But he is kind of binge watching at times these YouTube videos about yachts. And he's getting into boating, and he's looking at these yachts, and he's imagining without realizing he's doing it in a identity type exercise, but he's imagining like himself having a yacht, and what it'd be like to have a $6 million yacht and a crew and to travel around. So that became his goal. And so then I think it was last year, a couple of years, I think it might have been last year, he then got a boating membership where you could take out different boats. And now he's like learning about boat. You see what I mean? Like the action starts to follow the thing he's visualizing. Rich is a very dialed in entrepreneur who learned that probably a long time ago, has been doing it without realizing he's doing it. A lot of times, you see these habits of highly effective and successful people. They often do the things and they don't really haven't analyzed that's a thing that really helps them be successful. They don't necessarily know, you know what I mean? It's that unconscious competence or whatever. It's unconscious. And other than binge watching videos, the identity exercise is a bit more intentional. So it'll get you more consistent and quicker results in that direction. But anyways, long story short, yes, visualizing is good. Visualizing your pickup, rehearsing your pickup in your mind before you go out and talk to girls, all of these things, there's a way to do it and a way to screw it up. And I talk about that stuff in the course. So
good stuff. Well, look, we draw to a close now. I'll just ask one question, just because I thought this was interesting. So Tusk has this a concept which I sort of agree with, which is basically he decided that he wanted to travel around the world, but he also wanted to travel in a fairly comfortable way, let's say. So we're talking like staying in nice hotels, like 4-star, the occasional 5-star, but 4-star hotels, like a nice standard of travel. Now, when he started off, he didn't really quite have the money to do that, but he did it anyway. And the point was, you've got to acclimatize yourself to the life that you want, and then you will find a way to make it work. Would you agree with that, or could that be a bit of a rash thing to do?
So to a degree, I do. It's just that you have to be careful that you don't extend yourself so far beyond your means right? But and so I have a chapter on this. In fact, it's on your environment, our chapter, a module on this, because it was interesting. And in the entrepreneur group, Rich is talking about a guy who was I think it was Rich or somebody, it might have been somebody else, but was talking about a high-level salesperson who drives up in like a 6-figure car. And so when he's going to meet with those clients to close that deal, and he pulls up in that 6-figure car, it's not for them, it's for him. First of all, he likes cars, so that's easy enough, right? So if that's your thing, cool. Like my thing is watches. I like watches. I got a nice, deep sea diver on right now. And so that's my thing. But his thing is cars, okay? And so he pulls up in that car, and he knows it does that imprint on him. You know what? I am the guy who can close this deal because I'm the guy who is successful enough to be in this car. Yeah. And it just transfer that. It's a mindset shift, and it's right there. So like if it has that effect for you, if James is like, I'm going to stay in this 5-star hotel, spend some money because I'm the guy who can be here, and I'm the guy who has enough business sense to go for this, and that motivates him to work harder and to produce more and to dial in his entrepreneurial life better to then make more money. Great. Now if you're doing it, I think the difference is though,
you can't bankrupt yourself.
No. And if you're doing it to impress other people, to get external validation from them for what you're doing, that's where it's a slippery slope, and how you bankrupt yourself. Because now, okay, I have this nice watch, and it's not a cheap. I mean, Rolexes aren't cheap, okay, yeah. But it's not a Patek, it's not a AP Royal Oak. Like, I could go down this rabbit hole where guys are buying crappy but really expensive, worth a couple people's salaries type of watches. For what? To impress somebody else? Once you go down that rabbit hole, you get into debt, and it becomes, you're never enough. That actually harms you, because no matter, I could buy a $20,000 watch, and somebody else has got a $50,000 watch. And then I'm going to bankrupt myself to get a $50,000 watch. There's some guy comes in, he's got 100,000. You could have all the money in the world, then some guy comes in with a hotter chick or a better body. You see, when you start competing with the external world in a place of insecurity, that's when behaviors like staying in the 4 or 5-star hotel is harmful for you because of why you're doing it. But if you're doing it because it is something that puts you in that state of, I am a capable person because I'm doing this, and this is a demonstration of my capability, and I enjoy this, and then it's an internal motivation. Because when James stays at a 5-star, he's not doing it to impress anybody. He's doing it because he enjoys it and he wants the experience. And then that becomes a motivator. It's not like, oh, you stayed at that hotel. Well, I stayed at this better one. And then he goes, oh, I got to do that and one up him. It doesn't become that competition, if that makes any sense. I think that's an important distinction,
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Well, listen.
Oh, shit. I just looked at your message there.
Yeah. We want to bring it to a close because we've been on for a little while. So somebody in the chat was actually saying that the code doesn't work for some reason, because what we've got here is basically if guys want to sign up for the course, I'll put the link into the chat. Yeah. But then he's saying we have a discount code for you guys, which
doing it all. So it should be all caps here. I'll put it. I can't put it. I'll put it in your chat. Let's see. INTL. Let's make sure it's right. Playboy. That should be. Oops. Now I'm. All right, hold on.
Yeah. So if you want to sign
so let's do that. Yeah. So it's in that. It's in our chat right there. You see it?
Yeah, I don't know. He was saying it doesn't work, but that is the link, guys. So if you want to join Alpha Mindset, which you obviously 100% should, then that's the link. So it's $600 to join the course, but when you enter the link, you should be getting a 10% discount on that. So this is the guy here, Cameron, saying I tried the caps lock. and apparently it's not working. So I'm not sure why that would be. We can have a look at that behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'll test it. Tell you what, send me an email at here. I'm sending Troy the email. I want to throw that in the chat. apxmindset@gmail.com. Send me an email and tell me that you're doing it with the coupon code. And let me fix that. Okay. Let me see why that's not working. Because I'm showing here that it should work on my Kajabi software stuff. It's showing that it should work here, and it's not for you. I'm not sure why that is. So I'll investigate as soon as we're off. But
yeah, so
basically, doesn't work for you, send me an email.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that basically right. I think if you want to claim the 10% discount, maybe drop Paul an email here, apexmindset@gmail.com. And in the meantime, we'll have a look at the code, and I'll put something in the description below this, or we'll put it in my community tab or something like that. But yeah, we'll get it sorted. But anyway, you should definitely sign up for the course. I mean, I think today's stream is just the value that's been dropped in today's stream is gonna blow you away. It should be a no-brainer, especially for that price. So now is the time to take action, guys.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, thanks ever so much for coming on, Paul. Great to chat as always. And we'll bring it to a close. But I think I'm sure we'll both be around at the weekend for Rule Zero, which I think is going to be on John's channel.
Yeah.
So that's something for guys to look out for. But yeah, if you want to join the course, drop Paul an email, apexmindset@gmail.com. Drop me an email as well if you want. Troy@realtroyfrancis.com. We'll get it sorted out for you. Okay. See you soon.